Welcome, fantastic friends, to the new episode of the Fancast at 4 podcast, the number one Fantastic Four fan casting podcast on the internet.
Presumably.
Even possibly. I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
And I am Jack Mayer.
And we are your hosts as we venture into the what-ifs of Marvel's first family, who will be appearing in Phase 6 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
With Matt Shakman set to direct the MCU's Fantastic Four film, we can still explore what it would be like if a different director was behind the camera, and who might they cast.
This week, we are excited to have our friend Paulina Gallo joining us. Paulina, thank you for agreeing to come on our show. Please, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Hey, excited to be here for this special episode. My name's Paulina. I love these two individuals, so glad to be here. I'm not traditionally what you would say a movie fanatic. I'm more so in the video game realm, but this director that we're going to be talking about is near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited to talk about this today.
Well, it goes without saying, I think we love you too, Paulina. We are always glad when we can hang out, we can be on videos, whether it's the Montyverse or anyone else's content, and I am so happy that you agreed to be on our show, especially over your husband, Jeff, who is chickening out.
Has refused to come on this show.
Oh yeah, that definitely motivated me even more just to drive home a point that my husband is terrible.
We do also prefer you over him, as you both know.
Well, maybe this is the motivation he needs, some sense of competition, maybe spousal competition, to get him on the show finally.
We are very excited to have you on the show, Paulina, and we are very excited for the director we are discussing for this episode. He's an American filmmaker and artist known for his gothic fantasy and horror films, though he has also ventured into superhero films, sci-fi, action, fantasy, drama, and even musicals.
He has a handful of actors he regularly works with and collaborates regularly with composer Danny Elfman, who made scores for all but 3 of his films. His accolades include nominations for 2 Academy Awards and 3 BAFTA Awards, and wins for an Emmy Award and a Golden Globe Award. This week, we are featuring Tim Burton. Paulina and Jack, how do you feel about Tim Burton and his films?
Oh goodness, I don't know where to start with this. Like I said before, Tim Burton is near and dear to my heart. He actually was the first director that I knew by name growing up. So, and just his style, his art, his direction is just so captivating, whimsical, mysterious, and magical that he truly takes my breath away with his filmography.
I feel very similar to Paulina. Over quarantine, near the beginning of it, I did a bunch of director watches where I watched every movie in a director's filmography, and the first one that I watched was Tim Burton. I did all 19 of his movies that have been released at that point in order, and I had a really great time doing it. It was really interesting seeing, one, how his visual style had evolved, how it changed given the genre he was in, and also the central themes that were almost always present in his films were really fascinating to watch.
But even then, you still knew it was him.
Exactly.
Through this. Yeah, he always kept to himself, which I true to himself, which I deeply admire.
He's a very singular director, and he also doesn't write almost any of his films. I think he's maybe done like the story or screenplay for 1 or 2 of them, but it's always different writers. Sometimes he works with the same writers every now and again, but it's always a writer that Burton takes their script and creates his world of it, his interpretation.
I'm very glad we have you two on this, because for the sake of honesty, I am not the biggest Tim Burton fan. Of his, 19-some films, I maybe have enjoyed 4 or 5 of them. To be fair, there's a lot I have not seen, especially more recently. But I'd say I've enjoyed more of his earlier work than his mid to late work. Some exceptions in there that we'll maybe talk about. I don't know what it is. I am not squeamish when it comes to blood and gore and whatnot, and even weird, but just his sensibilities just aren't in line with what I've enjoyed. Again, that is not to say he isn't talented, he isn't creative, he doesn't create these awesome, wonderful worlds, it's just not for me for the most part. So I'm glad we have you, Paulina, and Jack here to pick up the slack that I may have dropped when it comes to Tim Burton.
And that's entirely fair. Like, I see Tim Burton as an art style, and certain art styles aren't for everybody.
So I think that this is a great segue into our first segment, for fantastic films. Here we will discuss 4 great films directed by Tim Burton. And should we start with the first one chronologically that we'll talk about?
Yeah. So this is not the first film that he's directed, but I would say this is the first film that is certainly Burton. His first film, actually, I believe, was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which weird and certainly can have Burton touches on it. But I say this film is unabashedly Tim Burton, and that's 1988's Beetlejuice, starring Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, among many other talented people. This is one of the few I actually really love. I love this movie. It hit all the right notes. You all are the fans. I will leave you to discuss further, and I will interject from time to time.
Okay, so I really like this movie, but I like the first half of this movie way more than I like the second half.
Totally fair. That is a totally fair opinion.
My favorite parts of this movie are not the parts with the title character. My favorite parts of this movie are watching Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis around the house. I love like the character designs. I love the world that he creates, obviously, but Beetlejuice as an antagonist just never really hit with me the way that I think it hits with a lot of other people. Beetlejuice, the character, never really stuck out to me as being like, oh, I have to, like, oh, I love this part of this movie. It's not for me necessarily. And I think because of that, the third act sticks out a little bit in my mind as being weaker because it's so Beetlejuice focused. That being said, I think that Winona Ryder's excellent. Catherine O'Hara, who we talked about last week, is phenomenal. The Deo scene, I mean, it's just pure like weirdness, and I love it.
Yeah, when they're out at the dinner table doing the Banana Boat song, one of my favorite scenes just in movies. And the commitment, the physicality all the actors bring to that scene is so joyful, even when it's about being possessed and trying to get scared out of this house.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fair. I actually kind of agree with you, Jack. Beetlejuice is one of those movies from his past that I frankly just kind of glance over. Like, it's not as memorable to me as compared to other films. And of course, the name Beetlejuice and the character Beetlejuice is, I think that to me is what stands out, and is interpreted in different media nowadays. I believe there's a Broadway show, and
a very good Broadway show.
That to me has, yes, it's iconic in the way that is iconic for other people now, but to me it's one of those movies that I think is just fine in my opinion.
That's where I'm at too.
I think it is a fair assessment that the third act certainly is the weakest of the film, but I think the first two are so strong that it kind of just outweighs it for me. And I think you're right. If the full antagonist would have been the humans trying to exorcise the two main characters from the house, could have been just as strong, if not stronger, of a third act without Beetlejuice's presence. But if you look at it in a vacuum, I think Michael Keaton plays Beetlejuice brilliantly. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't like how he is in the film itself, I think him as Beetlejuice is one of my favorite Keaton performances. Just him as the character, I get a lot of joy from. I think you can tell Michael Keaton is just having a blast being this gross poltergeist.
Oh, absolutely. He is clearly having the time of his life in that role.
And he made it iconic. Everybody knows what Beetlejuice looks like when you think of Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice. I had to say it 3 times.
And I think lastly, the last thing I want to say about this film is the whole scene where Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin's characters go through the door to like the bureaucracy of the afterlife is just genius. And then you see all the ways that the workers died. Like one guy was flattened, one guy, like the whole football team was in some sort of accident. And then you have that throwaway line that people who commit suicide become civil servants in the afterlife. And you have the secretary up showing that she had slit her wrist. I'm not saying that's happy, but like that whole aspect of this world building I thought was very clever.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really good world building. Again, production design, elite. It's fascinating seeing just how much effort was put into this in 1988. It was the catalyst for Burton to do Batman as well. I feel like, you don't watch that movie and think this is a guy who's going to half-ass it. Story, never really been my thing. Characters range from okay to great. But it's an important movie in Burton's career for sure.
Yeah, and I think touching upon like the visuals, there was no money left on the table for sure in that film. You can tell. I think it just goes to show that Tim Burton is such a detailed mastermind when it comes to vision and execution.
So, needless to say, you two aren't so excited about the upcoming sequel, Beetlejuice 2.
I mean, I'll watch it.
To be frank, I forgot.
I did too.
That's fine. Well, let's move on. We're getting my favorite films out of the way, apparently. We're moving to 2003 with, I'd say, something that certainly, in a lot of ways, is Burton, but is certainly a divergence from the normal style you have seen and will see going forward with some of these movies we'll be talking about, and that is the movie Big Fish. I adore this movie so much, though I made the mistake of watching it this afternoon.
Oh no.
Yeah, in its essence, it's the story about a son trying to learn who his dying father really was, because his father throughout his whole life told these fantastical stories that his son learned were half-truths or lies, or in some cases actual truths, and he just didn't believe. And having a father who had suddenly passed away about 1.5 years ago, watching this right before we planned on recording may have been a mistake. But it still reaffirmed how wonderful this movie is. The stories, Ewan McGregor as the pseudo lead of this film, as Edward Bloom, and all the adventures he goes through. I could talk about the whole movie, but that's not what this podcast is about. It is such a lovely tale of adventure and of fathers and sons reconnecting.
This, to me, exemplifies one of the core themes of Tim Burton, which is father-son relationships. If you go and you watch pretty much any Burton movie, you will see a character dealing with parental trauma typically related to their father. You see it in Batman, you see it in Edward Scissorhands, you see it in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because he had to add that in there. But I think that this one takes it the most seriously, if that makes sense. Not to say that the other ones don't take that concept seriously, but there's a certain... This one feels like a love letter.
A sophistication.
Yeah, it feels like a love letter to the father-son relationship, and an examination of, yes, it is a difficult relationship, but ultimately it is one that is going to be worth it for you to understand when you come into your own. Will is struggling with becoming a father, not necessarily knowing who his own father is. There is also a musical of this story. It was a book before it was a movie, and that musical, I think, is brilliant. It is so good, and it makes the movie better. But I do really love this movie as well. I'm right there with you, Dan. There's such a power to one, Ewan McGregor's performance, but two, Albert Finney as
100%.
older Edward Bloom, and the relationship that he has with Billy Crudup, who plays Will. Heartbreaking stuff. Like at the end when he's taking him down to the river and he sees all of the characters from the story. Again, I'm going to use the musical here, but like that moment wrecks my soul. There's this line that Will has again in the musical, but I feel it every time I watch the movie. It's just like, who do we see at the river to greet you? Like everyone there at the river to meet you, everyone you ever knew, ever spoke of, waiting for you to arrive. It has my heart. It really does. It's a brilliant movie. It is one of Burton's best for sure.
The theme of the river is one that really hit home to me too. My dad had a big affinity for the Mississippi River, which we live near. After he died, I got a tattoo of the outline of the Mississippi River with some words that he said. So the idea of, again, the father-son relationship, going down to the river, anytime we'd cross over from Iowa into Illinois, over the Mississippi, he'd say, "Look, boys, the third largest river in the world," with such pride. We have since learned it's the fourth largest river in the world, but so just another reason why the themes of this movie really hit home for me.
Yeah, and honestly, I feel pretty similar to you, Dan. This movie pretty much unlocks a core memory for me in my family as well. I not to go back in history, but I actually remember going to the movie theater and seeing this with my mom and granny. I had no idea what we were seeing. We frankly didn't go to the movies often. So I walked in knowing nothing. And I just have these core scenes that will always be with me. The river, the bathtub, the field of daffodils, the town when it's restored. I will forever remember them. And I feel a connection with my mom and granny to that movie, just like you feel a connection to you and your dad. And that truly hits home with the theme of this movie, which is you may not understand your family or understand what they've gone through in their life, but there's that connection of love there and storytelling that your family gives you.
And they live on in their stories. And
Yeah.
that's one thing my mom, my brother, and I are doing. We are working with friends and family to collect memories and stories of my dad to create a book for my future children, for my brother's future children, and friends and families, for them to have my dad live on in the stories and memories that we've all collected over the years.
Which is all that Edward ever wanted, was to be remembered. That whole idea of, like, especially like Edward kind of recognizes what his life actually is versus what he has said that it is by the end of the film. And it is so brilliant. Just like the moment of understanding comes right at the end, but it's all that you needed to keep going for Will.
On a lighter note, this is the first time that we see actor David Denman cuckolded. David Denman is probably most famously known as Roy from The Office, who has Pam, loses Pam to John Krasinski's Jim. And in this movie, he has his fiancée won over by Edward Bloom, and he eventually dies of congenital heart failure on the toilet. So not great luck there for actor David Denman.
Yeah, Don Price kind of eats shit in this movie, but it's fine.
Anyway, on that note, we are going to move a couple years down the line to something a little different that we get from Tim Burton. I believe this is his first feature-length movie in this style, and I will let our guest Paulina start talking about 2005's Corpse Bride.
Ooh, animated. Now, when I'm looking at Corpse Bride, it's to me one of the most iconic Tim Burton films, in my personal opinion, that I think is one of the greatest he's ever done. And he worked with Mike Johnson to make it happen. And this was a combination of painted out puppets, lots of visual effects. I think CG was involved in some parts with the birds and the butterflies, but it to me was a masterpiece, especially when it came to visual representation, the dreariness of the town, the dreariness of the characters, and then highlighting in this blue color, this mysterious corpse woman. And the story was based on an old folk tale, and I believe Tim Burton translated it beautifully in a fun, whimsical way. It was a musical as well. And I remember sitting as a kid when this came out. It was one of the first DVDs I've ever bought, and I would listen on repeat some of the catchy songs from the undead world. It, to me, had that combination of, it was dark, but it was whimsical, and it was still fun to listen to.
that song that Danny Elfman sings, with like the introduction to the world of the undead, earworm. Oh my
yeah.
God.
I have the tune in my head right now.
It's like that I think is just one of the best sequences from Burton, like much like the Deo scene in Beetlejuice, one of Burton's singular best sequences. It's gorgeous to look at. It's beautifully sung. It gives you such an idea of what the world is. And again, you know, a lot of people associate Burton with Nightmare Before Christmas, even though he only produced it.
Yeah.
But I think this is really the time where we get to see Burton in his full element, able to go so crazy, both with like the living world and the dead world. Like there's so much detail and character in the people in the living world.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee has like 2 lines as the priest, but I remember his character design. I remember the character designs of like the parents of
Yeah. You
like
remember the people in the chapel very clearly.
This is a movie I like, I don't love, and I think if it were any longer than the hour and 17 minutes that it is, I'd have some more issues with it. One thing I do really love is that, like, in the first bit, I only watched it a few days ago for the first time. The one thing I really noticed, like, oh, like, it is all just the same dark color through the first 20, 30 minutes. And then we get to the world of the dead, and it's so bright. And I love that contrast. It's like, oh, it's the living world that's dark and dreary, but the dead are just, you know, having a blast here. I guess the real negative I'd say, though, is like the motivations or the actions of the main characters near the end make me pause a little bit. You have the lead, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. Victor, who's willing to kill himself for this corpse bride he just met. You have the corpse bride willing to let him die for someone she just met. And then you have the bride-to-be willing to go back to Victor after almost agreeing to marry someone who was dead. I will let it be what it is, but if it were any longer, I might dwell on that a little more. If you can tell, I already have.
That's completely fair. And like that to me, just like the way you phrased it very much reminds me of like a Romeo and Juliet type storytelling.
I would probably be questioning those same things if this movie wasn't more kid friendly.
Right.
And that, I think that was like one of the problems that I had initially when I watched Corpse Bride. Is just like I felt like it would have been such a good PG-13, but it's not. It's PG, and I think because like you get like a lot of goofy things for younger kids in the movie that I think work very well. And I think because those goofy things work so well, and because you have this more childlike, whimsical tone to it, those sort of logical questions I feel like are okay to be sacrificed. If this movie did take itself more seriously and pushed a little bit more of its darker elements, then I would probably also have similar problems. But I don't really.
It kind of had a Rankin and Bass feel to it, which I think added to that it's for kids element, which makes sense to your point, Paulina, but also to yours, Jack. So with that in mind, I certainly see why it was the way it was. But again, if it were 10, 15, 20 minutes longer, I'd probably dwell on it more than I clearly have already.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was just enough time to tell this story. I feel like they kind of did rush it at the end and made some not so good decisions. Like, oh, like you said, Dan, some motivations were questionable, but it is a kids' movie. Kids don't necessarily need to follow along with too much logic and adult making decisions. And I think that must have been very hard for Tim Burton to balance, you know, the darkness and the tone while still trying to make it kid friendly at the same time.
I think he ended up striking a very good balance though.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it wasn't scary. It still was fun and dark.
Well, with that, let's move on to our final film for our discussion. This is one of Jack's favorite Tim Burton, if not just favorite movies, I believe. And we're going to 2007 with the dark musical Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Jack, take it away.
So you are right, Dan. This is not just one of my favorite Tim Burton movies. It is my favorite Tim Burton movie. It is one of my probably 8 favorite movies of all time. I have seen it more times than I can count. I watch it every Halloween season. I adore this movie so much. And I also, I'm like a gay musical theater kid. I love musicals and I love Stephen Sondheim. This is one of Stephen Sondheim's greatest works. I might even consider it to be, from a musical structure, his greatest work because of the way that it uses leitmotifs. It uses the Dies Irae, which is da 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 da, so effectively. It uses that in the opening song. So I'm just gonna go on a full-on rant here. I apologize to our listeners. So in the musical, there's a whole opening song with a Greek chorus, but in the movie that is reduced to having no lyrics, but it is still the musical score for the opening. It gives you this sort of impression of what this movie is going to be. But the line in the musical, which has the first instance of the Dies Irae, is "Swing your razor wide, Sweeney," which, again, immediately lets you know that My Friends uses an inverted version of that. These are my friends. Again, Dies Irae. Every character that is associated with death in this movie has Dies Irae in their leitmotif. Joanna has it with Greenfinch and linnet bird, nightingale, blackbird, Dies Irae. The only character that doesn't have it in their song is Anthony, who does not kill. Again, Joanna doesn't kill in the movie, but she does in the musical. But again, Anthony's song is so good. That is a song that's in my musical theater book. I love the darkness of this film. I think it uses cartoony blood so effectively. I can see Dan not agree with that at all, but I think that the fact that it is like it adds a fun element to it to me, because I feel like if you had this blood looking so realistic, you wouldn't be able to get into the style of the musical and the fun of the musicals, because it really is fun. It's fun watching these like horrible people just do horrible things. At least to me it is. And I think part of that comes from, one, Burton's visual style, and two, from the blood, which I guess is an extension of that visual style. This movie is brilliant. I will probably watch it again in like a week just because I love it that much. The other thing that I will say, it cuts everything I don't like about the stage musical from the movie, which I think makes it even better. It cuts like pretty much everything to do with Anthony and Joanna's romance, which is a snooze and a skip in the musical. So yeah, I think it's the perfect adaptation of a Broadway musical. I think it is probably my favorite musical movie of all time. But I love this movie.
Okay. Paulina, I'm going to interject briefly, and we'll end positively with you on this film. My enjoyment or lack of enjoyment has nothing to do with the music. Jack, we've had many discussions on this show, off the show, about musicals we like, and I think a lot of them are similar. This is our big divergence here. To preface, one of my irrational fears is someone coming up behind me and slitting my throat. Never loved that thought. Maybe it's because I watched Braveheart when I was too young. I don't know, but terrifies me. I do not like it when people touch or get near my throat, my neck. Never have, never will. Something that is just, you are learning something about me. So the fake blood, it gets to me every time. I've watched horror movies. I've watched gore where guts and intestines are falling out, and it, like Saving Private Ryan, didn't get to me as much as like the blood splurting out of necks in this film. And it just took me out. To give some love to this movie, there are, again, the music's great. I love the scene of Pirelli's Miracle Elixir when the kid is like handing out the bottles of piss and ink that says it'll grow hair faster.
Also, one of these to the Dies Irae. That's what did the trick, sir.
And of course, I think my favorite song is probably "Nothing's Gonna Harm You, Not While I'm Around. Nothing's gonna harm you, no sir, not while I'm around." It's like such a sweet, touching moment in such a gory, terrifying movie, and really nothing to do with the performances. The performances were good, but I am just so taken out by all the neck slitting that everything else, my eyes are covered in fake blood the rest of the movie.
So is the camera.
That too.
It's awesome. I love when the blood splats onto the camera. I'm sorry. It's so good to me because it breaks the fourth wall the way that a musical would.
So much blood.
Paulina, let's finish off on a positive note about this movie before we move on.
You want to really want a positive note?
Do you not like this movie?
Well, Jack, I'm going to disappoint you here. I've actually never seen Sweeney Todd.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I just frankly never interest me. I think I might be with you, Dan, on this. I'm truly not a big fan of gore. I typically try to avoid it. I've been prefaced that it's very exaggerated in this sense. So, exaggerated again in an artistic sense where you know it's fake blood and not really like true guts falling out. But
it looks like ketchup almost.
exactly. But even then, I just doesn't interest me. And I think that's okay. But at the same time, too, I think just sitting here and listening to your love and passion towards Sweeney Todd has kind of opened me up to wanting to give it a chance.
Mhm. And like that's the thing, I can absolutely see why it wouldn't be for everyone. And there are also just like there are some people who just don't get into the style of the musical. There are some people who don't like Sondheim,
Mhm.
which is blasphemy to me, but you know, I get it. But like it is definitely much like the meat pies an acquired taste.
I would at the very least maybe listen to the soundtrack, Paulina, because again, that's something I can't fault. I can't fault the soundtrack. It's what's around it.
The performances on the soundtrack I think are exceptionally good. Like Depp is like does quite well as a singer, especially with Epiphany, which is such a tough song for a musical theater actor to sing because it's so emotive and you have to figure out what kind of Sweeney you're going to be. Are you going to be a Sweeney who's got absolutely no heart, or are you going to be a sympathetic Sweeney? I personally like a Sweeney who's a straight up villain, and I feel like that's what Depp does so well.
And I also just think that's interesting of what you said too, that this character of Sweeney Todd could be played in different faces per se, different tones, which I think is really goes back to the heart of Tim Burton as well.
We could keep talking about Sweeney Todd and the other 18 Tim Burton films all day, but I do think it is time to get into our fantastic castings. Here, each of us will cast a Reed Richards, Sue Storm, Johnny Storm, Ben Grimm, and Dr. Doom with an actor or actress Tim Burton has worked with previously and has not had a major role in the MCU. Paulina, as our guest, would you please go first?
Gladly. And I have, I think, maybe a hot take on something that I'd love some thoughts on.
We love hot takes.
Yeah. So to start, my Reed Richards would be Freddie Highmore. P.S. I have a big crush on Freddie Highmore, so glad to be casting him. Sue Storm, Amy Adams. Johnny Storm, I picked Anthony Michael Hall, specifically in the Edwards Scissorhand era. And then for Ben Grimm, Asa Butterfield. And for Dr. Doom, I picked Danny DeVito.
Interesting. No complaints. All of that makes sense. I'm interested in the age dynamic between Freddie Highmore and Amy Adams, but you know, what says Amy Adams can't get a young, hot Freddie Highmore to, you know, husband up?
But also, look at her for her age. She's fantastic. She belongs with Mr. Fantastic.
I also love that we're using time travel to get Anthony Michael Hall back to his younger days.
Yeah, and I think in my mind as well, I might just be influenced by recently watching Edward Scissorhands and just watching Anthony Michael Hall's performance there, where he is charming, he's handsome, he's young, kind of mean, kind of a bully, kind of hot-headed, which I think fits very well for a Human Torch character. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. For my cast, I kind of broke my personal rule, not necessarily a rule of the show, and cast the same actor in the same role. So for my Reed Richards, I've also cast Freddie Highmore as young Reed Richards. However, I have also cast Ewan McGregor, who was in 2003's Big Fish, as older Reed Richards. And you might see a theme going out the rest of my cast. For Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, I've cast an actress who was in 2010's Alice in Wonderland, Mia Wasikowska, as young Sue Storm. And then I've cast an actress who's been in a multitude of Tim Burton films as the older Sue Storm, and that's Helena Bonham Carter, who was in, I think, at least one of the movies we talked about. No, she was both. She's in 3 of those. She was in Big Fish, she was in Corpse Bride, and she was in Sweeney Todd. For my Johnny Storm, I've also cast an actor you have cast, but in a different role now. I've cast Asa Butterfield from 2016's Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children as younger Johnny Storm, and Billy Crudup, who appeared in Big Fish as well, alongside Ewan McGregor. For Ben Grimm, I've cast one actor because he's going to be kind of this mentor role in the film, and that is from 2001's Planet of the Apes, Paul Giamatti. And my hope here is we can get him some redemption for playing the Rhino in Amazing Spider-Man 2. This is his time to shine in a superhero movie. Last but certainly not least, one of my favorite actors from 2014's Big Eyes, as the terrifying Dr. Doom, I have cast Christoph Waltz. And I mean, dude is just a terrifying bad guy. If you've seen Inglourious Bastards, you know the guy is just scary. And why not have that for Dr. Doom? Jack, any thoughts on Paulina's cast before we dive into yours?
I think that your cast is excellent. I have the same Asa Butterfield, Amy Adams question, but I'm also very excited to see how you play it out.
I definitely have some thoughts, and this is something that I kind of bounced around in my head a bit, and I kept rotating both of these roles and swapping them out for different actors and actresses, but I kind of liked where I land and can't wait to kind of talk about it a little bit more.
Now, Jack, let's hear your cast.
Sure. So I'm actually switching it up on you a little bit because I have a last minute change that I'm putting in here. What a twist, I know. So for my Reed Richards, I thought about who I would want to see really take a leading role in this. You know, Marvel tends to like casting people who have had bit parts here and there, who are names but not megastars yet. And to me, the person that exemplified that, who's been in a Tim Burton movie, was someone who had a bit part in a Burton movie, which is Chris O'Dowd, who was Asa Butterfield's father in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I feel like Chris O'Dowd has a great presence as an actor. He was great in Bridesmaids. I think he could bring the tenacity to the role that it needs. As my Sue Storm, I had a couple choices for this one. Ultimately, though, I decided to go with Winona Ryder. I feel like she, again, has this sort of presence to her. She's had a great resurgence recently with Stranger Things. She's so good. And I feel like she needs a Marvel movie at this point. Like, whether it's as Sue Storm or just in general, she just needs to be in a Marvel movie. She's just excellent. As my Johnny Storm, this is the one that I'm changing up. Originally, I had an idea to do a female Johnny Storm, but then I realized that no one had cast Jason Schwartzman yet, who was in Big Eyes, and I feel like Jason Schwartzman's just gotta play that role. Like I'm imagining him as his character in Scott Pilgrim in this role, and I feel like it's just perfect.
Funny, I did not with Tim Burton, but if you go back to the Wes Anderson episode, I did cast Jason Schwartzman as my Johnny Storm.
He's brilliant. He's so good. As my Ben Grimm, this is the person I actually think Marvel should cast in this role. Jack Black.
Hell yeah.
Jack Black is
totally
so good.
Such a good choice.
I feel like he brings the warmth, the heart of Ben Grimm, while also having the presence of him. And finally, my Dr. Doom. My Dr. Doom has actually been my Dr. Doom before, albeit not the one that was my main Dr. Doom. If you'll recall my first appearance on this podcast, in which I pitched what if M. Night Shyamalan directed a Fantastic Four film, there was a post-credit scene for that, where there was a knock at the door. Somebody said, "I'm looking for Reed Richards." Mark Wahlberg is my Dr. Doom for this film. Mark Wahlberg, star of Tim Burton's 2001 classic Planet of the Apes. I think Mark Wahlberg is the world's best comedic actor, especially when he tries to give a serious performance. I just watched parts of The Departed last night. He's so funny in that movie. The guy does his job. He must be the other guy. Perfect. That's my Dr. Doom. He's going to be from Liberia, but he's going to have a Boston accent.
Perfect. Again, I'm a little disappointed because initially I knew you told me Ava Green was going to be in your cast, so I quickly have changed something in my movie, not in my main cast that I've said, but something in my movie to slide Ava Green in there. But no, all in all, top-notch cast. Love it from top to bottom, both yours and Paulina's. So well done.
With our films now cast, it's time to pitch our Tim Burton helmed Fantastic Four films.
But before we get into those pitches, I have two questions for all of us. First, are your films origin films?
I'd say, yeah, mine is an origin film.
Mine is not an origin film.
Mine also is not. Secondly, is your film in the MCU?
I want to say no, it is not in the MCU.
Mine is also not in the MCU.
Okay, mine is. With that said, Paulina, as our guest of honor, would you please give us your pitch for a Tim Burton helmed Fantastic Four film?
Oh, okay. Lots of pressure here. I'm going to preface. I like to think I'm a very creative individual, but this is not my medium at all. So I mainly wanted to touch upon a couple points that I think would make this a very Tim Burton-esque pitch. And I'll talk about that as I go. But essentially, I'd imagine a story where, and this is why I was like hesitant to say if it was an origin film or not, a story taking the traditional route of this group of friends winds up accidentally being exposed to cosmic rays and thus gaining their superhero powers. But where my pitch differs is it wouldn't focus on Reed Richards as the leader. It would focus on Ben Grimm being the Thing and going through his journey and perspective of becoming the Thing, and mainly going through this journey of accepting himself after going through probably the most drastic transformation out of the entire group physically. I mean, that it's shocking. And I'd imagine we'd follow the group, gaining these superpowers, finding evil in the world, wanting to step up to the plate to try to be superheroes, and frankly, not doing a good job in the beginning, being very rocky. The world is not ready for a superhero group. It's very shocking. Now, other characters, the media and public spectators are excited, but when the spectators and media start seeing the Thing, they're not sure how to interpret the Thing. They're not sure if he's good or evil just off of his appearances. And it allows our villain, Dr. Doom, to be able to get away with a lot of his plans and schemes and, frankly, just let him do his thing. And I think Danny DeVito would do a good job being not only adding that charisma and comedic aspect, but also being able to, add to the fuel to the fire of this negativity that this new superhero group, especially the Thing, is getting. And I'd imagine the tension would build enough that the group would break up, essentially. That this is a bad idea, they're disappointed in themselves, and it would follow the Thing go through a sequence of self-mourning, not only losing his close friend group that he thought was almost like a family, but mourning the normality that he had once in the world. And only after a turning scene where he rescues a child and it was captured on social media, the child is grateful, as if the child sees through the Thing and sees Ben as Ben, that the Thing realizes that he's beyond being the Thing and he's just Ben, and he's kind-hearted, and he gets the group back together and they defeat Dr. Doom in this heroic act. Now, as I've been imagining my pitch, I really take inspiration out of some of these movies that we've talked about, especially with colors, having it more be like a darker tone, and really that is throughout the film. Having Ben and the Thing being the singular warm colored tone in this film. You see that in Edward Scissorhands, that color contrast between the colorful townsfolk versus Edward. You see that in Sleepy Hollow. The town is dark and then it becomes warm once conflict is resolved in the end. And I really want the focus to be on the Thing and what his experience and journey about becoming a hero is like. And taking that life lesson that you are beyond your looks, you are beyond people's expectations of and first judgments of yourself. And really, it is about the kindness of your heart and what you do as a person that actually matters.
I don't know what you were nervous about. That was delightful.
That was
Paulina.
brilliant. That was so good.
It was great.
Jeff
so well
could
done.
never.
Yeah, your husband pales in comparison to that pitch.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, I always, even though Tim Burton can be fun and eccentric and weird, I always think there's such an emotional tone and just beautiful storytelling about just some of these simple life lessons that he embeds in these films. And I feel like that's one of these things that I feel like if he was going to tell a superhero movie, it's going to be about how you can be a superhero in your world and what makes a superhero, not the powers, but the kindness of someone's heart.
That's wonderful. And I mean, I have a strong affinity for your pitch because Ben Grimm is one of my all-time favorite Marvel characters. I love the Thing, and really you highlighted everything why in your pitch. So I would totally watch the hell out of that.
And really, he is the heart of the group. He is the glue. Like, even though Reed Richards is the leader, Ben keeps the group together. This crazy, dysfunctional family that we see in multiple different forms and shapes, but it's always Ben.
That was really great, Paulina. That was fantastic.
Yay, I'm so glad. And I also would like to say, and this is something that Jeff, my husband, pitched, Danny DeVito has to do the meme that's online at some point with the guns. I don't know what he was referring to.
So anyway, I start clobbering.
Exactly. But I feel like Asa Butterfield will really capture the heartfelt emotions of, you know, the toll that would take on Ben through this journey. And I was introduced to him as an actor through Sex Education. And
He is wonderful in that.
Absolutely. And a little quirky, a little weird, and I think that fits him so well because he in Sex Education gains confidence. And that's what Ben Grimm needs in the end. He needs to gain confidence and comfort and balance that, you know, being able to play off the haters and just joke about themselves, but really joke about themselves and not like hurting themselves while they're joking about themselves. You know what I mean?
Not being self-deprecating to a non-harmful way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think he would be able to capture that amazingly. And I know, Dan, you mentioned Amy Adams being a little older. I see Sue Storm as like more of a motherly figure and always trying her best. And I
have no problem with it. I just had a question about it. Like,
oh,
hey,
yeah.
good for Amy Adams.
Yeah, for sure.
And good for Freddie Highmore. You know, Amy Adams is a catch too.
Yeah, and I think she's a very powerful woman. She's very intelligent, very mature. She is a partner to Reed Richards. Reed Richards needs that support. And I think Freddie Highmore would play him beautifully. He has that balance of being able to sound smart, have a little bit of an ego, but can get over his head a little bit too much. So
you did a wonderful job.
That was really
Jack and I have a lot to live up to now. So.
Yeah, we do.
No, I'm so excited to hear. I was nervous about this, and I'm just so happy to be here and just share what I would think Tim Burton would do in the superhero film.
Well, Jack, I'm going to turn it over to you to see how your pitch compares.
All right. So as I had said, this is the least amount of prep that I've done for an episode thus far, which, you know, I've done a lot of prep for most of these episodes. So we'll see how this goes. The top of the film, the images of superheroes are an absolute ruin. Everybody hates them. They're spitting on them. Monuments that were built to them once are being torn down. But the Fantastic Four still believe in their goodness. And because of that, they decide to show the world what the goodness of superheroes can actually be. So they decide, in the spirit of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, let's say, to hold a contest where anyone from around the world can submit to this amazing experience, win a day with the Fantastic Four. You know, you're going to get to see the inner workings of the Baxter Building. You're going to get to see their powers on display. It's going to be incredible. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for one lucky child. They've been prepping this for a while now. They're going on and they're promoting it. They get the results, and one person has submitted, one young boy who has asked if he can bring his father with him. Of course they agree because, you know, it's a child. They want to respect the wishes of the parents. And so the four agree to fly them out. The only problem is that they're from another country. They're from Latveria. But again, the four, to show good PR, the four agree to fly them out from Latveria to the Baxter Building to spend a day with the Fantastic Four. When the boy and his father arrive, the father introduces himself as Victor and is very interested in the four, more interested, it seems, than his son. And this dynamic seems a little off to Reed, who is reminded of the relationship he had with his own father. This is something that Sue picks up on and asks him about as the tour goes along. Reed tries to push this feeling down, tries to tell her that it's fine, just focus on the tour. But it's something that plagues him the more and more that the tour goes on. This tension builds between Victor and the others, particularly Reed. Ben, however, is sort of the face of the tour. You know, he's the thing. He's the one that looks the most superhero-y. So he's engaging with the boy. He's engaging with Victor, despite Victor's much more interest in the surroundings of the building rather than the actual people themselves. But at a certain point, Victor's son disappears. This scares the four and it angers Victor, of course. They run through all of these various rooms in the Baxter Building, which shows previous villains that the four have fought, teases potential future villains that they could fight. But they still can't find the son. Reed is particularly desperate to find him, again, because he's reminded of this whole dynamic that his father had with him. Eventually, they make it to a room where they see someone who looks like the son from behind. Reed goes up to him, turns him around, son's passed out in some kind of coma. But it doesn't look quite right. Sue goes up, starts to look at him, realizes that this is something that's been induced by somebody. Reed turns around and looks at Victor. What did you do to him? What are you talking about, Reed? What are you talking about? I didn't do anything to him. It's my son. Why would I do anything to it? Don't lie. I know you did something. What did you do? And eventually Victor reveals himself to be the one who had put the son in the coma, and that he is something of a doctor in his home country. Dr. Doom. He's used this tour as a way to steal the secrets of the four, harness them for himself, and in the meanwhile, destroy the image of the four. These people who couldn't even keep track of a child in their building. You think they're going to be able to save children in the real world? This results in a big fight scene. Johnny and Sue are easily taken out. Ben's peacemaking method is no good. And eventually comes down to Reed, who has to use diplomacy, use this idea of fatherhood to finally break through to Victor. And it works. Victor realizes the error of his way, apologizes to the four. He's, of course, banned from ever coming back there, but leaves with his son. Reed and Sue have a heart-to-heart. Reed apologizes to the rest of them. They think about new ways to rebuild their image, and Ben says, we're already off on a good foot. Back in Latveria, Doom and his son come back home. His son turns to Victor, asks him, did I do well? Doom responds, you were perfect. We see then that the son is actually the one who is keeping all of the information about the four. Father and son smile at each other, cut to black.
Awesome. Again, for having midterms and still doing this, that is great. I am very glad you went the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory route. However, in the middle of your pitch, this parody song kind of popped in my head. I'm like, Doompa Loompa Oompa Dee Doo. I am the son of Victor Von Doom. And I couldn't get that out of my head. I heard your pitch, though that was kind of going around in the background.
Oh my God, what a twist.
It's a twist.
Yeah.
Shyamalanian twist, if I might say so.
It just seems to be a recurring theme with Mark Wahlberg, I guess.
Is it wrong that I imagine Ben wearing a little tour guide hat, carrying a little flag?
No, because I'm now going to use that.
No, very good. And like I said, it makes me mad that even with a fraction of the effort that you said you usually put into it, that it was that good.
Dan, let's hear yours.
Okay. The irony of this is, for not being a big Burton fan, I was on a roll with this pitch. I don't typically write it out. I usually have like bullet points that I kind of touch on. This is now 4 pages, which is a ton for me. So I will try and get through this clearly, but also as fast as I can for the sake of time. Cold open. The camera quickly flashes to an image of Doctor Strange, still played by Benedict Cumberbatch, unconscious, possibly dead. We then pan up to see Dr. Doom standing over him, looking on angrily. "Give me the book, Mr. Richards, and I promise to make this end quickly, with only a little bit of pain." The camera moves to the bloody visages of the Fantastic Four, with Reed holding what looks like a futuristic binding, holding together old worn-out pages. "You'll never get the Darkhold, Doom." "Well then, annihilation it is," Doom proclaims as he holds up another ancient relic of some kind, as fire and destruction rain from it, destroying more of the city around them. "Reed, we have to do something. Anything," Sue shouts, with Johnny and Ben behind her. Reed suddenly gets an idea, instinctually flipping through the book, stopping on a specific page he had seen earlier. "Doom," he says, and as Doom looks to him, "Go to hell," and a flash emits from the book. Then a portal under all of them open up, and they are dropped in. We cut to black and the title card, Fantastic Four, Into the Netherworld. We then return to the scene of them all falling through the dark dimensional hole until they finally land. While in near darkness, they hear a voice echoing out. "Ah, we have some new guests. But what is this? You're not dead? Oh, this is very interesting." A fiery spotlight then shines on a silhouetted form of Mephisto, who, in line with current rumors, is being played by Sacha Baron Cohen. "No matter. I can make do with you mortals. I do not know who you think you are, but no one toys with Victor Von Doom," Doom says. Just as he is about to hold up the ancient relic again, Mephisto, without looking, says, and claps his hands twice. Doom proceeds to fall into another blackened void. His last gasping shout is the last thing heard from him. "What did you do to him?" Reed shouts. "Don't mind him, Reed. This guy is in line for a clobberin'," Ben says, cracking his knuckles. As Ben approaches, Mephisto smirks and says, "You're in my domain now. Welcome to the Netherworld." He then snaps his fingers, and it goes black again. This is where we get a stop-motion montage, as to incorporate another Tim Burton staple, of the various trials and tortures the Fantastic Four are put through. For example, Reed is literally stretched to his limits before being put back together. Johnny is consistently put through even more extreme degrees of hot and cold temperatures. Ben is forced into a small room of unbreakable mirrors, and Sue, she is just forced to watch it all. After the montage, we return to human forms, cut away from the stop motion, and we get another card that just reads, "Later." We first cut to a scene of Doom fighting the increased gravity on his body from the fall, grasping, reaching, and finally clutching the relic, which, when activated, causes him to stop in midair. The camera does a 360 turn, and suspended in air in front of him is the green outline of a door, unintelligible whispers emanating from it. Doom hovers over to it, and after some reluctance, opens the door. With a bright flash of green light, the scene ends. We then return to the Fantastic Four, and because they are not actually dead, they are still aging as they normally would, and in their own grisly cells, they are much older than when we first saw them, and are now waiting for their next torture. However, some demon minions that look an awful lot like Timothy Spall lead them out to a Burton-esque hellscape with Mephisto sitting high upon a throne of skulls and a river of souls flowing around him. As they are prodded towards Mephisto, Johnny quips, "So, ready to let us go yet?" Mephisto gives a toothy grin. "Well, actually, I am. Being that you're not actually dead, you do not belong here. Thus, you can go." "What's the catch?" Reed questions. "Ah, yes, always questioning things, aren't we, Mr. Richards?" Mephisto muses. "But you are correct. There are some caveats to your departure. First, I cannot promise my horde of demon companions will not try to stop you. And secondly," he turns to Sue, While the rest of them can use all their powers, you must remain invisible, cannot use any of your other powers. If you do, you return to me. You cannot go back to the mortal world. That's not fair, Sue claims. Yeah, why is she the only one singled out, Reed protests. Why? Because I think it's fun, Mephisto japes. At this point, Ben cannot contain himself and he rushes to take on Mephisto. That's it! I've had enough of you for more than one lifetime! It's clobbering time! As Ben raises his fist, Mephisto rolls his eyes and points a finger at him. From it, a thin, green, zigzagging beam of energy zips out and strikes Ben, instantly obliterating him into orange dust. But then, suddenly, from the dust, a large explosion of rainbow crystalline energy emerges. Ben is gone, even his remains. Well, I did not know that would happen, Mephisto muses, with slight surprise. Anyway, best we be going before my friends get here. As a large rumble comes from one tunnel, the three remaining have no time to dwell in their shock and horror for their vaporized friend, and they rush towards the tunnel they were directed to. The rest of the film is the three's fight to escape the netherworld. Johnny and Reed have to trust that Sue is there, only hearing her voice. The journey is tough, and they use every bit of energy to make it to the end. However, at one point, they are overrun by demons. Johnny, seeing no way out, realizes he has to sacrifice himself. With one final flame on, he erupts into a blistering inferno, taking out many of the demons. Unable to see if he survived, Reed and invisible Sue press on through the tunnels of hell. Once they arrive at a point where the exit is visible, they notice that it is closing off, and there is not enough time to take it on foot, or even with Reed's stretching abilities. After that brief moment of realization, the invisible hand of Sue touches Reed on the shoulder, and she softly says, "My love, I know I will see you again." Reed, looking surprised, realizes he is surrounded by one of Sue's shield bubbles. "No," he says, "I can't leave you. You're the smartest man in the world. You'll find your way back to me," Sue calmly assures her husband. Before he could protest further, Sue propels the bubble with haste through the nearly closed exit, Reed getting one final glimpse of his wife before she disappears behind the solid ground. As the shield and his initial daze dissipate, Reed starts to get a sense of his surroundings and takes note of a few things. First, he has returned to his younger self, like he was before going to the netherworld. Second, the portal led him to the Avengers compound. With many heroes we have already met in the MCU coming to check on him, all he can say as he fights back tears is, "I have to go back! I have to go back!" But then, the patented Reed Richard look crosses his face whenever he gets a good idea. Wanda. We have to find Wanda. And that is where the movie ends. But what is an MCU movie without a mid-credits scene? After some credits roll, we return to the netherworld. Mephisto is sitting on his throne, using a tiny demon as a toothpick, as an ominous voice of a woman, which sounds an awful lot like Marion Cotillard, echoes through the hellscape. "Mephisto, have you ever stopped to wonder what it is you're doing in hell? Or as you call it, the netherworld? This realm is of the accursed. Why do you think you're here?" From the shadows emerge the Infernal Four. Blackheart, played by the always creepy Crispin Glover. Nightmare, played by the always great Michael Sheen. Null, the Living Darkness, played by the seductive Ava Green. And Chithon, played by the menacing Colin Farrell. In unison, the four proclaim, "Hail the one below! Hail the one below!" A ghostly fear crosses Mephisto's face as the three encroach upon him. We wipe to black. Finally, at an end credits scene, from a first-person point of view, we see this luscious Nordic landscape. Looking down, we see a pair of normal human hands. As we look back up, we see Natalie Portman, who was in Burton's film Mars Attacks, by the way, as Jane Foster, dressed up as a Valkyrie. Looking at us, she holds out her hand and says, "Ben Grimm, welcome to Valhalla." And that is where the movie ends.
Oh,
Oh my God.
oh, that was so good, Dad.
Oh my God. I have so many emotions. Like you went, like I felt, first of all, opening up with Doctor Strange dead just like stabbed me in the heart immediately because I love Doctor Strange. But then having them go through this journey, Ben dying, and then him coming back in an uncredited scene is just, oh my God, that.
So good. That
Oh,
was so good, Dad.
Thank you. I am particularly proud of it. As you can tell, I put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
But, you know, it just the idea just kept snowballing. I'm like, oh, oh, I got to do this. I kind of have to use this like Orpheus Eurydice kind of theme. Oh, I could do this. I need to throw in some stop motion. Like it just kept piling, and the puzzle pieces all just kind of fell into place.
Yeah, it flowed so well.
Yeah,
And
it
like,
really did.
even going through the middle, I'm like, I still have no idea where you're going with this. How are they going to get out? Like it had that suspense that these superhero movies need, where these people need to figure out a plan, but then these things happen. And I just appreciate too that you've set the tone for a potential next film for this entirely as well.
I'm not going to lie, I had those 4 demons at the end always pegged, but I didn't decide to call them the Infernal 4, kind of playing off the Fantastic Four until like, oh, that needs to be a thing, until like a minute or two before I did the pitch. No, I am so glad you liked it. I'm so glad you responded to it. It is something, as I'm typing with like, oh yeah, gotta do this. Yeah, hell yeah.
Write that down, write that down.
It's like the Jim Carrey gif from Bruce Almighty as he's responding to all the emails. It's what I felt like. So yeah, I am mad now. The problem with getting so involved in these pitches are these movies aren't happening, and it makes me mad that they're not now. Like all of the stuff we pitched, all the stuff guest pitched, Jack stuff you've pitched makes me mad.
Look, I've been meeting with Kevin Feige ever since my first pitch. I know he's listening. Kevin, like that. Do that. I
feel like I've been blacklisted after my M. Night Shyamalan pitch, to be quite honest. No, it was fun. I'm glad you liked it.
I want to ask.
Yes.
What type of music would you envision for this?
Oh, I mean, I feel like it has to be Danny Elfman composing.
Of course, but what kind of tone?
I feel kind of like his kind of that normal ominous whimsy, because I want to play up Mephisto a lot, and I feel like with Sacha Baron Cohen playing this character, I want this to feel kind of like a joke to him, and everything, the irony or the dichotomy between the whimsy and all this dark, scary, torturous stuff happening to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah, it's his world that they're living in.
Right. But we do have to stop our show somewhere. We've done our fan castings, we've done our pitches for a Tim Burton Fantastic Four film, and I certainly hope you, Paulina, Jack, our listeners, enjoyed our exploration into this what-if scenario. I want to make a special note that the Fancast at 4 podcast is hosted for free on Anchor, and we encourage you, if you have your own podcast idea, to check it out. It is really a great resource for getting your idea off the ground. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
If you are listening on YouTube, we would greatly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button and commenting with who your Tim Burton cast would be, on what you thought of our lists and pitches, and on which director you'd like to see next.
I want to thank Matt Hart and Maddie Gunner for the fantastic theme music they created for us. And I certainly want to thank you, Paulina, for being our guest today. I hope you had fun.
I did. This is a very different experience for me, and I'm so happy that I was able to do it with you both today. So thank you for having me.
We're happy that you were able to do it with us as well.
100%. And that is our show. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Dan Bettenhausen.
I'm Jack Mayer.
And on behalf of our guest, Paulina Gallo, we hope you all have a fantastic day.